Yeah, it looks like we're up and running. I see the icons are showing activity. And I've got my big cup here, the one I like the most. I like my Second Amendment cup too, but this one just is so spot on. I mean, I'm not always right 100%, but pretty dang close on a lot of things. And I figured that I'd have a little. This is a cereal beverage. It's not coffee. It's Pero, if any of you know what that is. And I put a little honey in it because I've been yelling a lot the last few days doing some things. I was surprised I could even get a live stream on tonight. I hope I'm not interfering with anybody of any importance, but a lot of times Monty will be doing one about this time or Felicia Lockhart. So, but it's the only time I really have available, so I'm going to go ahead and do it and send out my information here. So here we go. Okay. Welcome as you come in. As all of you know, it's Tuesday, the 29th of March, 2022. I'm Roy Potter. Welcome as you come in. Thank you for letting me know I'm 5 by 5 there, Hopkinson. And everything that we're seeing is troubling. And although I'm not going to use this time as a scriptural platform to talk about the scriptures and all that, I will reiterate one, and that is that when you see all these things, see that ye be not troubled, for they all have to come to pass. And it's very upsetting to see this, to see all the innocent people suffering, dying, having their loved ones suffer and die. And of course, it's going to get worse. It's not just the situation I'm talking about in this area of the world right here. I'm not talking about just there. All of you should know what I'm pointing to. I'm going to be careful on this for a couple of reasons. I've been censored off another platform recently. I mean, totally. They totally banned me. A lot of you probably didn't know I was on another one, but it was for specific things, and they banned me from it. And of course, you know that Twitter is not allowing me to get my direct messages or message requests, and I see that the count there is still going up. So people aren't aware of it. Probably new people that are coming on my Twitter account, and even though I've talked about the fact that I can't get my DMs, I can't access them, they don't know that. So I apologize for anybody that sent me direct messages or message requests on Twitter and I can't answer you. That they will not let me access it. And then, of course, you know I have to be careful here on YouTube because they've taken down several of my videos over the years. The most recent one was just a few months back, and they suspended me for supposed to be, I think, 30 days, but somehow I got back on slightly before that. Uh, anyway, so all those things are happening. So, again, hopefully you can see the area of the world that I'm talking about here. That's not the only thing we're going to discuss today because there are things going on in our neck of the woods as well. Very serious, bad things. And I'm going to try to take some questions today. Not, hello, Roosevelt. Not that I have any, all the answers, but again, using the little bit of experience I have in the military and in the political side of the house, scriptural, and uh, my training and education, and we'll use all of that. Okay, I messaged Roy about my NIH study, NIH, and they did that to him. Yeah, was it you? It very well could be. Yeah, yeah, actually, I think at first I thought it might be something that Gigi Sims did, but Giovanni, you're probably absolutely right because I've been talking about a lot of that on Twitter, and they don't like it. I'm surprised it took them that long. So you're probably right. It was probably your information, which I never saw, by the way. At least not on my DMs. Okay, so why did I name this battle damage assessment? Again, it's not just for what's going on in this neck of the woods, it's what's going on everywhere. And really, the battle damage assessment that I'm making is not against those who are against us. It's not a battle damage assessment of those who are standing against us. It's a battle damage assessment of us and of those who are trying to stand for the right. You know, back in the 60s, and I think it's written in the book too, there was a movie that came out with Roger Harris and I forget the lady's name at the present time. But anyway, it was about King Arthur. And King Arthur was trying to figure out what they should use the round table for. And he thought, might two right? No. Might is right? No. Might four right? And that's what they settled on. Well, that's not what we do today, especially not the Anglo American Alliance, NATO, the United States, or the Five Eyes countries. We are not involved in might for right. We are in might makes right. And we've been in that mode for a very long time, which is why we're having trouble in this area of the world. China's another deal altogether. I'm not going to really get into that too much. You can see where we're going with that, especially now that the petrodollar has pretty much taken a dive. Russians were forced into a situation by us, I might add, that we said that they could no longer use our system to get payments for their products, especially their oil, right? So what they said is, okay, everybody else, you have to pay in rubles or Chinese yuan or Indian rubies. I think that's what they're called. Rupees. I think that's what they are. But at any rate, the point is that we caused that, like we've caused everything else, all these difficulties for Russia over the years, making promises and then breaking them, just like every other treaty the United States has ever had that was of any consequence to keeping peace in the world, they break them, or in their own country, for instance, with the Native Americans. And Russia finally said, okay, we're withdrawing from the economic system. And of course, that's partially the BRICS, if you know what that is, the Brazil, Russia, India, China. And it used to be Spain as well. I think they've kind of dropped, or South Africa rather. I think they dropped out, but they might come back in. The point is that economic warfare is warfare. It absolutely is. Siege warfare, all of that. It's still warfare of one nature or another, and that's what we're seeing. So basically, Russia said, first of all, you promise not to move any more NATO, make any more NATO countries along our border. Second, you promise not to allow weapons into the Ukraine area. And this was all stuff that we had agreed to back in the 90s and again in the early 2000s. And we violated it, as we always do, because Russia, a lot of people are thinking that Putin and Russia are part of the New World Order and that this is all a theater to get our attention away. I'm not saying it isn't, but we're going to talk about some things tonight that might show you that possibly Putin and the Russians are not playing the WEF game. Not saying that they're not getting drawn into it, but I'm just not certain that they are actually taking an active part knowingly. Then again, I don't think they're that stupid. So we're going to get into that a little bit more, and I'll take your questions on it too. And again, these are my viewpoints from looking at it from a professional point of view. I've talked to you about Colonel Douglas Macgregor, of all the military people, pardon me, that I've heard talk about the situation in this section of the world. I think his is the most accurate, and that's the way it's turning out now. So let's talk about that first, since that is concerning a lot of people. Of course, we're worried about tactical and intercontinental ballistic missile type of assaults with those very, very bad weapons. And rightly so, we should be. And of course, then there are satellites. We know about the North Korean ones, and I'm certain that there are Chinese ones and Russian ones, all with the possibility of detonating a fairly good size weapon system that could cause an EMP. And you know what an EMP is, right? Electromagnetic pulse, which can take out power grids, communications, etc. A lot of things there. So a lot is happening in this section. Biden hasn't said that he's going to start a draft, but remember, I warned everybody that they're after your women, after your daughters. They want them. You see what's happening in our country. You see how we're denigrating women, how men can now, I got to be careful how I say this, as you know, can now compete in women's sports, and you understand what I'm talking about, I hope. That's talk. You know, I thought we were all about women and women's rights, and now all of a sudden we're moving into this area. Well, it's been a slow degradation of our moral system and our understanding of times and laws. And that kind of goes back to Scripture again. In the Scriptures, it talks about in these days, men, especially the wicked ones, will think to change times and laws. And we've already talked about in the book of Revelation where it says that there will be no bride and bridegroom because they're trying to change the sexes, right? All of that's going on. We see what they're doing to our children. And in several states now, they're pushing. I mean, this was first proposed in Florida, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 years ago. And then they left it, thank goodness. Anyway, post, um, let's see, how can I say this without getting in trouble? Uh, Taking the lives of young ones up to a month old. Let me just put it that way. And you know what I'm talking about. That's actually on the table. So, see, what they do is they get you to agree that you have to tolerate a certain immoral behavior. You have to tolerate it. Then you're required to accept it. Then you're required to actually promulgate it and push it. And that's where we are right now. And you might wonder what that has to do with this area of the world. Well, quite a bit, because they're not biting on that. I'm not saying that there isn't abortion in Russia and all of that, but their attitudes are significantly different about families than what they are in the United States right now, at least publicly and politically. So that all kind of comes into play about what these Eastern countries are seeing, and particularly this one right here, of course. Just as a side note, you may have heard there are several states where they've passed laws about allowing men to be in women's sports. You know what I'm talking about, right? Well, for you in Utah, I've told you that the LDS Church seems to stand against it. And I know this is going to upset a few people, but you need to understand the politics in your states, and particularly in this one that we're talking about now. It's on this side, Utah, right up here. You got to think about this if you're Mormon, okay? They're really pushing officially the GMIs. We've talked about that and how satanic that is. And then there were things that I was involved with in investigating higher ups in the church back in the 90s to do with abuse situations. Let's just put it that way. If you know about the Franklin cover-up and those types of things. Well, in the last few months, there have been these pushes to allow men and women's sports. And that happened in Utah. And the state legislature passed a law, or they passed the law. It didn't become law yet, but they passed the bill to not allow that. In other words, to stop that problem of men participating in women's sports under the guise of being, right? Well, guess what? I've talked to you about how the governor of Utah, his name fits him, right? His last name is Cox. And he is busily engaging himself in the activity of taking care of other Cox, C-O-X, read between the lines, of everybody up the line from him. And he's not going to do things that are not approved for him to do by those leaders of the LDS Church at 47 East South Temple, regardless of what they say publicly. So what's happened here is the Utah State Legislature said, we're not going to allow this to happen, where men will participate in women's sports. We are not going to allow that. The governor vetoed that. And then the legislature, surprisingly, considering the power that's at 47 East South Temple and Washington, D.C., that Cox bows to and serves all the other Coxes, they overrode the veto. But that shows you what we're dealing with. I've told you that you cannot trust the leadership in Utah or any other state, especially at the governor's level. I even have questions about DeSantis, who everybody pushes as the best governor. But even there, what happened here in the last few days? They say you can't talk about these intimate relationships or the changing of that intimate biology okay, to kindergartners through third grade. What? So it's okay to do it from third grade onward? Who got to DeSantis? Why did he do that? That's evil. So it seems like a win, but it really isn't. And this is happening everywhere in the Anglo American Alliance and in the Five Eyes. All of those countries that should be holding up the highest moral standards are the ones who have flushed them down the toilet. And I will stand by that. As I've said before, I don't care if people don't like what I say. There are certain things that are times and laws that are not to be changed. And the relationship between men and women and what that is. And I'm not saying you have to have kids. I'm talking about that relationship, okay, which can bear the fruit of children. That's governed by biological universal law. Are there mistakes? Yeah, every once in a while the biology gets messed up, and you'll have a person that has characteristics of both sexes. That happens, um, or they might have both, but one will be a little more dominant than the other. I know those accidents happen, but by and large, you don't go after the exceptions. There's an old Army saying, and I've said this many times. You do not reinforce failure. You reinforce success, and that's exactly what nature does. Those things that are accidents usually die off. They can't reproduce normally in that form, right? So they die off. So accidents in nature, those types of things that occur, nature will reinforce success, not failure. And that's a principle that used to be an Army axiom, U.S. Army axiom. Anymore, I don't know. But at any rate, so we see all these degenerate, horrible things going on in our countries. The willingness, I mean, it started with the ending of fetal life. I try not to use too many words, the same words too many times. This all started very early on, and I'm not saying that. Well, let me just put it to you this way: we should never have legalized it. Put it that way. That's bad. And now that they got us to go that far, and they got us to go with Trump there, for instance, holding the many-colored flag at one of his campaigns, and he even talks about it even now. He's proud of that, and that's something that we need to be concerned about. And you know how I feel about Trump. He's not going to fix anything. He's going if he gets back in office, if he does, he's going to betray everybody again. He will, no doubt in my mind. Okay, and the OWS thing is proof of that. He hasn't pulled back on that, and he's going to push the digital currency system as well, digital money system. You know he's going to do it. He's going to do it, and he's going to come up with an excuse as to why. But anyway, so we have all of these things going on, and Russia is primarily Russian Orthodoxy, right? I'm not going to try to get into Putin's mind, but I can say that if he's not concerned about his people, I would be very surprised. Okay, he's given NATO since 2014, actually a lot longer than that, but that's when the coup took place by our State Department, by Obama, and by Victoria Nuland, all of that, and Soros. Overthrew the elected government. I don't care if they were corrupt or not. Look what they ended up with. And we did the same sort of thing in Iran, Operation Ajax, those types of things. We've done this everywhere, and yet we condemn Putin for taking the risk of protecting his people, both in his country of Russia and those in Ukraine that are actually his people. We've seen the atrocities that are done. I mean, they want to point at Russia, for various reasons, but the fact of the matter is that the atrocities are really being done, as you can see, with the way they've treated the Russian POWs, the Ukrainian Nazis, how they've treated the Russian POWs, what's happened there, and the fact that they've been shelling the civilian population since 2014. But because the American people have such a short attention span and they don't remember anything, they think this whole Ukraine thing started with Russia invading, and they don't know the backstory, and most of them aren't smart enough to figure it out, or they don't care. But there is a backstory, and this war has been going on, proxy war between the U.S. and NATO, using this whole situation with Russia for a long time. We've been moving up weapons into the Ukraine area, as you all should know by now. The problem with the bioweapons labs, that's admitted now, and yet we're trying to pretend like they were only research labs. Yeah, right. When Russia comes out with all of the information, and I'm sure they're getting that all together right now, we're going to find out that the U.S. and NATO were planning a mass genocide in Russia. Now, I put up on my Twitter, I'm not sure I did it on YouTube, about the situation, the tactical situation in this area now, okay? And there's no doubt that the Russians have been methodical in their envelopment, and I talked about that before. I was worried about the speed of that envelopment, knowing that the Ukraine area is controlled by the likes of Soros, WEF, etc. We know about the biolabs, we know about the corruption, we know about all that, and then the basic democide and genocide that the Western Ukrainians have been doing against the Eastern. We understand all that, at least we should, okay? So for whatever reason, Putin decided that he put up those exercises on the border and called them exercises. And I've talked about these before. These exercises that come up and the countries say, "Oh, we're doing an exercise," they can be a prelude to war. It's called staging equipment and personnel, staging for a war. So whenever you see an exercise, you should automatically think they may go to actual kinetic operations. And that's, of course, what happened here. And despite the fact that a few of us were hoping that that wasn't going to happen, it did. And now what's happened is that the encirclement is near complete. I don't know that Putin will push on, they call it Kyiv now, Kiev, whatever. I don't know that he'll push on that, but politically he has to get the Ukrainians to submit and NATO to back off. So he's really taking care of the problem right now. It's pretty much done. A little bit mop up has to occur, but the big question is why now. There was and I don't want to quote this person verbatim because it's their work, but there was this thing that I put up on Twitter, and again, I don't know if I did it on YouTube. A very good analysis done by a gentleman on what's happened and why and how the Russian tactics strategy in this country was kind of shown to us in Syria and how they took care of Aleppo and Idlib and those places. And we are seeing that same thing, of course. So it's a methodical encirclement, and Putin has, I think, has righteously decided not to go to total war because they are his people. They are, really. He didn't want to do that. If Russia wanted to get this done in a short amount of time and didn't care about civilian casualties or infrastructure damage or all that, they could have easily bombed the country out, and it all been over with 2 weeks ago. But they've decided to do this to save lives and infrastructure. That's the way I look at it. That's the way a lot of other analysts are looking at it. That's the reason why Putin has been dilly-dallying a little bit, or at least apparently so. He's opened up the humanitarian corridors, which unfortunately the Ukrainian Nazis that are there, you know, so I use that name every once in a while, but I don't want to repeat it too often, tried to close down those corridors and use civilians as shields, refusing to allow them to go, even to the point of shooting them on sight if they tried to leave. So those things are happening, and our people over here say nothing about it. It's the most disgusting, despicable thing, and I have totally written off the American government. I have absolutely no use for the U.S. government at all. They're lying, thieving, murdering bastards, all of them. Even Rand Paul, all of them. There are no good ones. The closest one that I can see, I mean, we've got a couple like Ron Johnson and Massey, but by and large, our government is the most evil government on the face of the earth. So that leads us to, did Putin do this as part of the WEF and New World Order plan? We see how the economic warfare has been going on in the United States and in other countries, right? And did the war start here because it's a distraction only? It was just a way for Putin to further damage in other words, to further cause more battle damage to the United States economically. Was that his only reason for doing this? Was he really under the direction of Klaus Schwab and the WEF and the NWO? I could see where that argument could be made, but seeing as how they've exposed the biolabs, seeing as how they've mentioned the Nazis, seeing as how the Western nations, especially the United States, for instance, cut off the Russian access to the economic system, knowing, or they should have known, that Russia had China to fall back on, and India, and Brazil for that matter, but primarily China and India. It seems like to me that the real purpose of this thing is to take down the U.S., which I've said for a long time. What's the motto of my channel? The intel community is our most dangerous domestic enemy. They're not fighting foreign enemies. They're fighting you and me, our own governments. Both the governments of Canada, I say both, I should say all the governments, Canada, the United States, UK, New Zealand, down here, Australia. In the supposedly free world, that's where the most tyranny and dictatorial events have occurred during the last 2 years, going on 3. So somebody brought up Ivanka Trump, who I pointed out was a member, an honorary member of the World Economic Forum's youth, young leaders organization. And somebody wanted to make a big deal about her just being an honorary member, that she never really went through the 5-year program or whatever it is. Well, in my estimation, the fact that she didn't go through the 5-year program and was made an honorary member is even more indicative of what her actual loyalties are and those of her father. But regardless of that, we see Tulsi Gabbard saying the right things. And I've asked her, I don't know if she's seeing my tweets, probably not, but to be honest with everything, she should disavow and point out how evil the WEF is and the young global leaders' whole situation that people like supposedly Putin and Macron and Trudeau went through, and of course apparently Tulsi Gabbard as well. All she has to do is say it's all was evil. I finally realized that, and I pulled out. And she really needs to do that if she's serious. And I told her that her testimony is questionable if she doesn't. Whether she sees my post or not, that's another thing. But I guess my point in bringing that up is that people are saying, well, Putin was a part of that as well. He's been in there with Schwab and the whole business. And I understand that. But I've also said that if he's not really going along with the program, it was smart of him to get involved so that he could see the big picture. Am I excusing him, thinking that everything that's happening right now was Putin's plan to take down the New World Order? No, I'm not saying that, but that's kind of the end result. So right now what we're seeing people say that this whole thing that Russia has done, that Putin has done, may destroy the New World Order and all the work that they've done. Now, is that propaganda as well? Well, we'll have to wait and see. What should be our reaction to all this? Should we fall into one group of saying Putin's a righteous guy who's taken out the New World Order, or Putin's a bad guy who's destroying the free world? Well, look at the fruits. Look at what Ukraine was. Look at what the Western nations and political leaders have been using Ukraine for. And then you can kind of say, well, the evidence, the preponderance, that means the most of the evidence, the preponderance of evidence suggests that this is actually hurting the New World Order and the plan to institute the New World Order plans. Whether that's a fact or not, we'll still have to watch and see. But in the meantime, what's our response? Our response is to watch, to be aware, and to prep, pray, and stay out of the way. To use our discernment, but primarily we have the responsibility not to defend the United States corporation and send our sons, and they want to get our daughters. I know that's questionable now because they couldn't get that passed in the last NDAA, but boy, I'll tell you what, they could convene a special thing of Congress and that could change in a heartbeat. Don't let your sons and daughters enlist or join the military. Those that are already there should figure out a way to get out because it's going woke anyway. And as I said before, the Russian military may still be basically a 1980s, 1990s type of military, but they're powerful, they're strong. And if they had wanted to totally destroy Ukraine, they could have done it. It's because they don't want to. They're trying to save as many of those people because they're their people as they can. So that's my kind of battle assessment. Who's really being hurt right now? The real battle damage assessment, when we look at it, how badly has the New World Order hurt the people? That's you and me, severely, and it's going to get worse. Our governors, for instance, I pointed out Cox today, is totally unwilling to stand by principle. And I even questioned DeSantis, as I mentioned earlier, with allowing this ridiculous thing of third grade up above third grade, even though they stopped it from kindergarten to third grade and up, allow them to have these deranged educations. Let's put it that way. Again, to just read between the lines and understand what I'm trying to say. So we're hurting right now. They've done us a lot of damage. People are either asleep or the only thing they're worried about is their pocketbook. They're not seeing the bigger picture, which is the destruction of the liberty of themselves and their children. Last week, I did a short live stream at a United Steelworkers demonstration, protest, strike against Rio Tinto and some others. They want a new contract and an increase in wages. I'm not saying that was the wrong thing to do. Their concerns were just. I'm not saying they weren't. What I'm saying is that people are willing to go out for their money, but not their liberties for themselves and their children. There should have been an uproar during the last 2 years. We saw it in Europe. We saw it in Australia. We saw it in Canada. Virtually nothing here of any substance. A little bit in New York and a few other places, but nothing like it should have been. There should have been millions of people doing outside against the government and against the health officials, et cetera, that I saw in this United Steelworkers protest last week, and I put it up. Okay, and we don't. We've lost our way, and we're more concerned about the Super Bowl and about the World Series, et cetera, than we are about the fact that our children are being subjugated and imprisoned, and ourselves too. So the battle damage assessment is we're almost beyond operational capability. I'm talking about the people. And if Putin's goal is to destroy the economic power of the West and to destroy the satanic influences, and he's still got them here. China's not a clean one owner, right? Still got that problem in China. But the Western Alliance has been as I said earlier today, the Western Alliance, NATO, and especially the United States, Five Eyes countries, but especially the United States, is the most evil force in the entire world. We point our fingers at other countries doing things that we actually did do. Iraq, Syria, Vietnam. I could go on and on and on, right? We didn't like it when Khrushchev brought the missiles over into Cuba, right? And we were ready to go to war for that. But oh no, no, and even do false flags. Our DoD was going to kill Americans in order to justify an invasion of Cuba and war against Russia. Oh yeah, but they don't think it's a bad thing for them to encroach upon the Russian borders, uh, and that Putin and Russia shouldn't respond to that. The hypocrisy is overwhelming and it's disgusting. And of course, the agreement that NATO would not bring Ukraine in, and of course, now that's looking more and more that it's not going to happen. I know a lot of people were concerned that Russia was going to go into Poland. That's not their goal. I think that's quite clear. However, if Poland continues to be a protagonist, an antagonist rather, if they continue to be an antagonist, wanting to send troops, using Poland as a staging area to send troops and materiel into Russia, Russia might have to respond. But that was never Putin's original goal. That's not what he's about. Okay. So again, am I saying that Putin is a good guy? I've said all along that scripturally the wicked will destroy the wicked, and that God used the Assyrians, who were they were a pretty good society actually. They were pretty well developed in that time, but they worshiped false gods and they practiced some of the crazy things that our nation is doing now, especially with child sacrifice, etc. You read between the lines. But God used the Assyrians to punish Israel because of their evil. They were falling for some of those same things. So the Assyrians, who weren't necessarily righteous at all, God used them to conquer Israel. Well, at the very least, that's happening here, where Russia is now showing the United States to be the paper tiger it is. The only thing it has is the petrodollar and its huge military. That's really all it has. And the military is dead in the water without oil. Dead in the water. If they can't get oil, and the military planners, Biden cutting off our oil in the United States, who does he think he's going to be able to fight when he doesn't have energy for his own military? I know that there are reserves in the military, oil reserves, energy reserves. I understand that. But those things need to be replenished. And when you cut off your own logistics supplies, internal supply lines in particular, you can't sustain a fight. And I've talked about that. Wars are often won by tactics, but the real winner is logistics. A good war planner will ensure that the logistics are planned to the very minute details with a redundant system of supply. And we're done. We don't have that. And our own government's done it because they're evil, because they are working for people that do want to destroy the United States. And the FBI and the Department of Defense and the Department of State and all the bureaucracies are more concerned about debauchery. Look at Hunter Biden. The FBI told Matt Gaetz today that they don't know where Hunter Biden's laptop is. That's not this particular FBI director, this assistant director's responsibility. Really? Do you see? You're the enemy. The battle damage assessment is that we're hurting, we're bleeding out. I've heard Alex Jones say that, and he's absolutely right. All right, so that's kind of my summary, my analysis, my ideas about where we stand right now. I think what we're going to see in this area of the world is that Russia will retain the western area of Donbass and the Crimea, and maybe some other areas, but it looks like he's going to go short of doing anything to Kiev. And again, that's to show restraint, to save lives and infrastructure, and to have a bargaining chip, which I think is being used at this point. We'll know shortly. The war could go on for months. It could, especially if the United States and NATO continue to say that they're going to supply Ukraine, whether with asymmetric warfare and weapons or openly with other logistics or even troops. I have no doubt that we have CIA operatives there, as well as former special ops and military people that are now mercenaries, and that the right or wrong of a situation doesn't matter. It's the money. You know, active duty military don't care too much for mercenaries. Don't like them at all. They get paid a lot of money for doing the same kind of thing, and they can run away, and they don't get in trouble. Okay, so that's kind of where I wanted to go tonight. Let everybody know kind of what's going on. I want to reemphasize this. I'm very disgusted with Governor Cox of Utah. He is a cocksucker. His name fits him very, very well. And I warned about him. I've warned about him on all this, all the things that have happened the last 2 years. And then this comes up. He's an evil, evil man following the dictates of evil, evil people that a lot of people around the world consider to be holy prophets, seers, and revelators at 4070 South Temple. And it's not true. Do I have a bone to pick with the Mormon Church? And I still call them that. Yeah, I do, because they're lying hypocrites. I know them for a fact because I know them. I know them. Okay. And Governor Cox is a piece of shit. You got that, cock? Okay. The end of the dollar is definitely here. Alex Jones was talking about that quite a bit today, and he's right. David Knight's talked about it. It's too bad, that alliance broke down, but that was Alex's fault for not holding to principle and worrying more about the financial position and of his organization and his access to the halls of power. And whenever you do that and you compromise like that, you lose. Despite all the nice things he says, I'm talking about Alex Jones. You lose the spirit and you lose the moral high ground. As I pointed out in a tweet the other day, probably just yesterday, Alex has kind of pivoted away from Trump and his continuing pushing of the OWS. That was a point of contention that I've had with Alex, supporting Trump over that, or at least not calling him out the way he should. Well, Trump is still not pulling away from that. And rather than continue to call him out, AJ is now trying to pivot onto the problem with children, okay? And again, read between the lines here. I don't want to say too much. And when he did that, I saw what he was doing. Not saying that that's not an issue, okay? But if he's worried about children being killed up to a month old, all right? If Alex is really worried about that, why has he stopped calling out Trump for his pushing of the OWS, which is now moving into very, very young children, right? So there's a hypocrisy here that I cannot abide by. And so I continue to call Alex out on that. And I pointed the fact that he's pivoted now to try to get away from that, not seeing the connection between the killing of innocents with the OWS and the killing of them for child sacrifice purposes. Okay? There's no difference. Not really. But he's trying to pivot away from the OWS thing. At least that's the way I take it at this point. And it's disgusting, Alex. You either stand by total principle or it's really time for you to shut your ass down. Okay. I'll take some questions here in case I didn't cover something that somebody might want to, if we're still up and running. I don't know if we are. Boy, I'm way behind. So I'm just going to move to the end here. Yeah, everybody needs to pray. Of course, pray, stay out of the way. I say that all the time. Gather with like-minded people if you can and get yourselves ready. Biden's already admitted that there's a food shortage and it's going to get worse. And it's not just food, it's everything else, right? We've been talking, I remember last summer, you guys know who Monkey Works is? You know that. And I'm not really picking a fight with Monkey Works. Roy is angry. Yeah, I am. My kids and my loves and my family are all in trouble. What is OWS? Somebody will have to tell you. You should know that without somebody telling you, but maybe somebody will put it on here. So, what happened last summer was I got information from military sources that they were being told to get their houses in order, that there were going to be shortages, that there was a possibility of war with Russia, all of that. And so I put out, hi, BP Earthwatch. Jesse, how you doing? Learn to barter and how it will fit into your surroundings. Right. Learning to barter is a very important thing. Absolutely. So thanks, Jesse. And thanks, Roosevelt, for putting up what OWS is. So I came out last I think it was July, maybe it was June, July, somewhere last summer, and said, this is happening in the military. They're being told to get their houses in order, and that these shortages, they needed to go out and start getting food. That's one of the things they were going to do: go get supplies from PXs, Costco's, etc. And also the fact that they might get deployed. Well, I don't know what was so difficult about that. It's very obvious, but Monkey Works came in and kind of slammed me, said some nasty things. Basically, that I didn't know what I was talking about. Well, now here we are, and it's been going on for how long now? So I did know what I was talking about. I had good sources, and here we are. They're purging the military. That was another thing that they were concerned about, getting their houses in order, that they might be losing their time in service and time in grade and being forced out of the military. So to get their houses in order, we saw that happen, and it's continuing now. I don't go after other people's programs. I'm not trying to get their followers to come to me. Okay? So I would ask people like Monkey Works not to do what you did. I think Monkey Works does it for money. I don't know. I don't really care. But the point is I don't. And what I said turned out to be absolutely 100% correct. Okay. Yeah, that's right. Kiss my grits. 1 month old. Well, yeah, that's right. Well, it's gotten to the point now where, euthanasia of 60 and older and the really, really young is really what they're shooting for. They really are. Euthanasia, democide, humanicide is being practiced worldwide right now. And you know who's pushing it? The father of the what? Trump is, yeah, probably Frank Bushman, yeah, secretly. Yeah, I think so. I mean, his son in law certainly is, and his daughter, right? If anybody wants to look at what Frank Bushman said here. I'm very careful about repeating some of that stuff too often, but no, that's right. That was another subject that came up about the Jews being the synagogue of Satan. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not what the scripture says. Jesus did not say the Jews are the synagogue of Satan. What he said was, or quoted as saying, is that there are those who say they are Jews but are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. Jews aren't of the synagogue of Satan. Those who say they are Jews but are not are the synagogue of Satan. So be careful when you interpret scripture. Make sure you get the whole thing in context. Okay. No, I don't think, Paula, I don't think Monkey Works is uninformed. Uh, Sometimes people just got to pick a fight. you know, I don't. I'm not going to say that my military experience was any better than his or vice versa. I'm just saying that it was pretty obvious what was going on, and I just said it. Now I've said it about this situation here. I said that Russia could kick butt, could even kick our butt. They're using restraint here for whatever purpose, whether it's at the order of the WEF, which I don't believe, or because they're really concerned about the people and the infrastructure. They really, because they could wipe out Ukraine in a couple of days. Just their normal tactical bombers could do that very easily, and their artillery. It's like I told some people the other day. A Russian battalion battery of artillery can take out an entire grid square. A grid square is 1,000 meters square. In other words, you got 1,000 meters on this side, 1,000 meters on that side, 1,000 meters over here, and 1,000 meters on the bottom. That large of an area, an artillery battalion, battery of Russian artillery can take out that entire grid square. They're not doing it. And they're not using their bombers the way they could. Why? Because they don't want to destroy the infrastructure and the lives of the citizens. That's why they don't want to do it. But at the same time, as I warned about earlier about dilly-dallying, it would be used to say Russia's weak, to start garnering support for a possible retaliation or a military action against Russia, which I don't think Putin should wait for. You're lost? Walter, what do you mean you're lost? What happened? Okay, yeah, I'm not sure, Walter. I didn't mean to lose you. But my whole thing is I am personally convinced. I'm not calling the war yet and saying Russia's going to win. If anything, they're facing a very long, protracted, asymmetrical guerrilla warfare at the very least in Ukraine and possibly even in Russia itself because of all this. Okay, I'm not saying that's not going to happen, and I'm not saying that Russia is without fault. I'm not saying that the United States is fully responsible. But the wicked will destroy the wicked, and I look at Russia as being, at the very least, the Assyrian coming in to punish Israel for, which would be us, for our indiscretions and our lies and our hypocrisy and our wickedness. Not saying that they aren't, but as the way I look at it right now, they're not pushing the things in their media and by their government that we are in ours, and you all know what I'm talking about. Okay. Yeah, BP Earthwatch. He says Russia pulled back a lot of troops, started bombing when the troops were out of the way. A Russian depot was hit inside Russia for the first time. I didn't know about that. Did that just happen? Probably did. I'll get caught up in all that in a little while. That would not surprise me. That would not surprise. Like I said, the Russian Spetsnaz are really really good. They're special forces. The Spetsnaz are some of the most highly. They're I don't think there's anybody in the world that can come close to them. So if who's ever done that, Jesse, who's ever done that, they just opened up some real crap coming down on them because the Spetsnaz are not going to play games. That might be where Putin draws a line and says, "Screw this, we're just going to take it all out." Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying, Walter. Yeah. No. Yeah, that's true. By the way, everybody, so you don't get confused here, Brian Young of High Impact Flicks, who's very good. He and I even communicate every once in a while. Brian Young he has a YouTube called Monkey Works as well, but it's spelled differently. It's WORKS. I'm talking about the guy who says he is prior military, and his is Monkey Works, WERX, I believe. Okay, so I'm sorry, Walter, I should have clarified that. Yeah, I'm not talking about Brian Young, High Impact Flicks, and his Monkey Works. I'm talking about, and I forget the guy's name who does Monkey Works on Monkey WERX. I don't remember his name because I don't follow his channel. A lot of those people that were involved in Q, I stopped following them a long time ago. A long time ago. Yeah, that's true, Terry. Or Ted, 123. Yeah, it says that in the last days, men will be lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God. Yeah, in other words, they'll be more concerned about their football games and their whatever. Uh, if you and the way I reword that is I say that I will stand for principle even if I'm the only one to do so and even if it's not convenient. And that's the same thing as saying that you won't be a lover of pleasure more than a lover of God. Am I perfect about it? No. No, there are times when I think I've told you, I'll be laying in bed late at night and I'll get this feeling like, I really ought to do a live stream on this subject. No, I don't want to do it right now. I want my sleep, or, I want to, whatever. So I'm guilty of that too, but it's really things uh, more involved than that. It's being not wanting to stand by principle because it might interfere with your income. It might be not making a public statement against something that's evil and criminal because you're afraid that your neighbors might talk about you. Obviously, I'm not in that category. I open my mouth way too much, but you see what I'm talking about, or that. Yeah, I really think that's really what it's about. Lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. In other words, if there's a right and a wrong, and you don't want to point that out because you have some extracurricular activity or something in your life that you don't want to disturb, maybe your golf game with your buddies. I don't know. I'm kind of reaching here, but I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. Lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God. That's not good. Yeah, the Pope was to reveal the fifth secret of Fatima last Friday. Did it occur? Because I can't find it. I don't think so. The idea was something with Russia. So there was some talk about the Pope, consecrating Russia or something like that. But you've got a big schism in the Catholic Church over this Pope. So I don't know. As far as I'm concerned, I don't. That's not even a concern with me. And I have some very good Catholic friends, both on YouTube and Twitter and in real life. I used to be a Catholic when I was growing up. I was a Catholic for a short period of time. I was a lot of things for a short period of time. And I'm not going to put all that down, but I don't really pay much attention to those visions and things. I personally don't. Not putting those down who do. Sometimes people get inspiration, revelation according to their own, and I've talked about this before, according to their own ability to understand their own culture and those things. So you shouldn't really put it down because it may fit for them. But for me, it just doesn't quite work. The young kids that had the experience at Fatima, very likely, I'm not putting them down either. Uh, but we'll see. Okay, we'll see. You thought Brian had more morals. Um, if you're talking, Brian Young is not the Monkey Works guy. Is his name? There's some other names involved who are all in that Q thing. Brian Young of Monkey Works, WRKS, and High Impact Flicks. Those groups. It's not the same guy. Okay. Again, I'm going to say that. Okay. Again, Wendy, what the Utah governor did was the Utah legislature tried to pass a law that would not allow men to participate in women's sports. The governor vetoed it, which shows you what he is really like. And thank goodness the Utah legislature stood up against him and the LDS Church and the federal government and vetoed or passed the bill anyway, overrode the veto. I think somebody's asking me about the Albert Pike letters. Whether or not they're legitimate as far as actually from Pike doesn't matter. The material in the letters is absolutely 100% true. Okay, so people will say, "Well, he didn't write that. There's no proof of it. We can't prove it." It doesn't matter. The principles that the New World Order stands for are, and how they were going to proceed is there, whether Albert Pike wrote it or not. Okay, it's sort of like some other things which I can't mention here. Okay. Okay. Yeah, Rolf Steiner. Yeah, Russia. It's like I said. They proceeded very cautiously. They didn't want to kill innocent people or ruin infrastructure. They've tried to do it in a. I don't want to say it's a righteous war, but they weren't interested in total war and destruction. They could have sent their. I just said it. Their artillery, their their bombers, and they could have leveled Ukraine. They could have leveled it, and they didn't. Okay, so I What's my solution, Big B? Stand by principle when nobody else will, if you're the only one to do it. And that's not our politicians. So there's wickedness. We can't fix this. There is no solution that man can do because the wickedness has reached such levels that only, and that's why I'm saying that there's something else going on with Russia here. God uses, like he did the Assyrians against Israel when Israel was wicked. God told Noah to build an ark, and he told him how to build it. He didn't build it for him. Okay? God needed to punish Israel, and he told them that he would punish them. But he used Assyria to do it, and then Babylon. David and Goliath. The Philistines were attacking Israel. God didn't come down with a sword or a slingshot and take out Goliath. David did. Do you see what's happening here? Those of you who are looking for God to come out of the clouds, that's allegorical. It has to do with the Spirit of Christ in you. Is that saying that there is no Jesus Christ? I'm not saying that. I'm saying that he said that you take his name upon you and that you will do greater things than he has done. Wow. I'm not going to go into Revelation tonight and talk about all that, the book of Revelation. I will just say that my understanding is not the same as most traditional Christians. Okay, I'll just say that here. And that the return of Jesus Christ has something to do more with Malachi 4 and God pouring out his Spirit upon all flesh, and your young men shall, or your old men shall dream dreams, and your young men shall see visions, and your daughters and your sons will prophesy, because I will write my law in their minds and in their hearts. Something big is on the horizon for the human family. And we're at a battle damage right now that we're really hurt. And God is going to step in, but he's probably not going to do it the way you anticipate, at least most Christians anticipate. It's going to be something where he uses you, us. We get to participate. My son puts it that way. Jeremy talks about that. God gives you an opportunity to participate in his plan. He doesn't wield the sword for you. He doesn't plant the seeds for you. You have to do that. And I told a joke here a while back. I'll tell it again now. Joe, he's down on his luck. No money, he's suffering. One day, thunder, lightning, the clouds part, and he hears this voice and he says, Joe, it's God, Joe, you're going to win the lottery. You have nothing to worry about. You're going to win the lottery. Vision closes. Joe's just all happy. He goes about his life just carefree, because he's going to win the lottery, right? A day goes by, a week, a month, a year, and he still hasn't won the lottery. And he's going, well, God said I was going to win the lottery. Did God lie to me? Thunder, lightning, the clouds part. The voice of God says, Joe, you have to buy a ticket. Okay? That's the story with all of us. All of us. God will provide the resources, but you have to do something. So, what's my solution? Stand by principle even when no one else does. Prep, pray, stay out of the way, and speak against the evil that's in Washington, D.C., New York, London, particularly. No. Ted, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Don't throw away the Old Testament. Jesus quoted Isaiah. He quoted even books that weren't in the Old Testament. The New Testament didn't exist as such at the time. That was put together in 300 something A.D. at the Council of Nicaea. You, you, the unleavened, beware of the leavened bread. Do you know what leavening is? I'll ask you that, Ted. I'm just going to tell you that no, Malachi is important. It is Old Testament, but it's talking about our day when two main things happen. One, the sun in the heavens, the sun, not the Son of God, the sun itself, Shemesh, as opposed to the Son of God or the Son of Man. The Shemesh, the sun in the sky, will do something to give us healing. Whether it's to take down the Starlink, the electrical grid because it's being used for AI to control us, whatever, the chips in the brains, whatever. The sun is going to be the tool that God uses. The sun in the sky, that little ball in the sky that looks like it's on fire, that's used. That's in the future. It's not it's not something that happened in the past. The other thing is that God says, and in those days before those days I will send you Elijah the prophet, who will turn the hearts of the children to the fathers and the fathers to the children, lest what? I come and smite the earth with a curse. That's how important your family is and how important it is to God that you have your family, both back and forward. The root and branch, your root and branch. Do not dismiss the Old Testament because the New Testament doesn't mean things changed. And I know a lot of Christians say, oh, it's a new law. No, it's just, and we could argue about that for a long time. I'll just say it this way. Don't dismiss Malachi. You're making a big mistake. Go look at Joel, too. The book of Joel. Yeah, I'll get to that, Walter, at the end. Eyes to the horizon, ears to the ground, and situational awareness on high. That's exactly right. Okay. Let's see. We've been going for an hour and 7 minutes now. Let me just see if I can see. Oh, that's good. David Gordon, you're running for governor of New Mexico. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you very much. And you probably won't, I don't mean to discourage you, but you probably, if you stand for righteousness, the chances of you doing anything are very small. But getting out there and doing it is important because it's a witness, right? It says, this is what you have to choose. And if you choose this, you did it, not me, right? You chose the wickedness. I did, and I tried to offer you an alternative, right? Net Surfer, it's a good point. In ancient Israel, they used sidereal time. That's with the sun. The moon was used. The lunar calendar was used for specific connections to the sidereal. I'll tell you who covers this very well, but you seem to know something about it already. Someone who covers it very well is Felicia Lockhart on the Lockhart Perspective with Ronnie Mann. The idea of the Sabbath, for instance, and the feast days, that's all governed, of course. It's with the sidereal with the movements of the moon as to how you do that. So the moon is still important, okay? It's still important. Roosevelt saying, Chad's talking a lot about Gog and Magog, brief explanation. Well, I don't know that I could fully explain it, and I'm not so sure I can do it exactly right. But Armageddon and the Gog and Magog thing. Remember, as I've said so many times, you can't use Western linear thought to understand the scriptures. You can't do it. The scriptures were written in Middle Eastern thought, which is circular, okay, and it repeats. So there's a war prior to the 1,000 years, and then there's, according to the linear idea of things, there's a war at the end of the 1,000 years where Satan is finally cast into the fiery pit, right? So a lot of that's open to interpretation. just remember that these things are circular. I think that's really what I'd say about that, Roosevelt. Uh, I mean, we're going. This thing could go crazy. Uh, as a matter of fact, uh, Israel is not really conducting itself, and it never has. The state of Israel, I'm talking about, is not conducting itself as a godly kingdom. It's quite the opposite. A lot of God's laws it totally ignores. It's not the Israel of God. It just isn't. And I've talked about that before. So because of that, the idea of the valley of Megiddo, Armageddon happening here, not necessarily. I saw a thing the other day. I'm not saying I agree with this. I'd have to research it. I'm not really familiar with it. There was a person that said that in their research they believe that the original Jerusalem was actually in Russia. Could be. I don't think so. Okay, but the point is you have to look at some of these other things, and the most important thing is not to think in linear thought, not to think that this has to happen at this time, this has to happen at that time. You know, it's like the 7 years divided into 2 3.5 year periods. What is that really about? Well, 7 is a Zayin. It's a sword. Okay, so there are other events here that you have to consider, and the big one is the events are what are important, not necessarily the timeline. I'll just put it that way. Okay, so Clyde Miller, New Jerusalem comes down from heaven. That's allegorical. And you'll say, well, Roy, how come you cherry pick this stuff? Well, because I read the Dead Sea Scrolls. Okay, first century Dead Sea Scrolls are the key to understanding what really happened in the first century with the development of Christianity and on down through until about 100 AD. Okay. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I'm not saying it couldn't happen. Okay. Oh, Felicia, you are here. How you doing? I just talked to these folks about the Sabbath and how you and Ronnie Man have that down pretty pat. It all has to do. I mean, it's not every Sunday or Saturday. Yeah, as you know, it kind of rotates a little bit depending upon when the feast days fall and position of the moon, all that other stuff. Okay. Going back to the Jerusalem coming out of heaven. let me give you a picture of a prophet, be it John the Revelator, or Isaiah, or Jeremiah, Daniel, Ezekiel, whomever. Okay, let me give you an example. So, however it happens, I've talked about the Hekkelot before. It's the mystical system that the prophets use to gain access to the different levels of heaven. And a lot of people say, "Oh, that's Kabbalah." Well, Kabbalah developed from Hekkelot. But be that as it may, you're one of these prophets sitting there, and you know nothing about rocket ships. You don't know anything about, as far as you know, the world's a flat place. What's above you is firmament with nothing, but what you can see, and it's all right there. And below you is Hades. That's all you know. Okay, you don't even really understand the thing about the afterlife. Now, there's some questions about that. Obviously, Ezekiel knew something about it, and some others. But at any rate, so you're given a vision, and what you see is these things falling out of the sky. At first, they're a little piece of light up in the sky, and there are a lot of them. And then all of a sudden, they start to fall. How will you describe that? The stars of heaven fall. Well, the stars of heaven aren't falling, but that's how you describe it, because that's what it looks like to you. So what we're really looking at, and we saw that happen about 2 months ago, a month or two ago, when the sun sent out a really big CME, and it took out some of Elon Musk's Starlink satellites, and they fell. The stars of heaven falling. Okay? So the New Jerusalem coming out of heaven is allegorical, a lot like that. Okay? Same thing with Jesus coming in the clouds of glory, which is really coming from Daniel. The whole idea of the Son of Man, that idea of the Son of Man came from Daniel and a little bit from Enoch. But the point is that you're looking at it from the way you've been taught by 20th century preachers, sermons, popes, priests, etc. You got to go back and look at how they looked at it when they got the vision or when they got the information and put it in their culture. And then bring it back to today and say, well, the stars aren't going to fall. Yeah, that's not going to happen. You might get a meteor. Yeah, it's possible. Okay, meteors coming out. Okay, that'd be another thing. But are they really stars? No, they're not. Okay, so they could be comets. They could be, meteors and meteorites. But I have a tendency to believe that they're probably the satellites that are being put up there to control mankind, and that they're going to fall out of heaven, just like we saw what happened when there was that huge CME. It was about a month or two ago, Jesse. I think you even talked about that on BP Earthwatch. When those satellites came down, you said that's Shemesh sending a warning shot to the New World Order and the devil's kingdom. That God can take all of that out without any effort at all. And I believe that. I believe Malachi, which is, again, when I was talking to somebody about Malachi here a few minutes ago, don't dismiss those things. Okay? All the law and the prophets. Yeah, that's possible too. Yeah, they could also be, the and that's an interesting subject, BP Earthwatch. Jesse says they could be chariots of God darkening the skies on the return. Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that either. But I think my point is they're not the stars falling. But that's how they'd be explained if they saw that. I know there's some evidence that people have talked about that there are apparently some very large vehicles parked around the sun. I've seen some of those videos and some of that, and I'm not denying that couldn't be. I don't restrict God and how He does it, or the Elohim, or the B'nai Elohim, and I'm not talking about the fallen angels. I'm talking about the sons and daughters of God. Especially if they've received their resurrection. The resurrection's been ongoing since Jesus was resurrected, right, according to Scripture. He was the first fruits, but then we had those 2,000 people that were resurrected that people saw, and of course that resurrection is going on even today. Even again, this is where people get fouled up on the linear as opposed to circular thought, but it could be that there are resurrected beings or other angelic beings who use vessels to travel. I don't have a problem with that. So yeah, that could very well be, Jesse. It very well could be. Well, yeah, we do have shooting stars, but what really are they, Ellen? They're not stars at all. They're meteors. They're pieces of dust. So my point is they're not stars that are falling, but that's how they'd be described by somebody who didn't know all that. Ten four. Yeah, thank you, Jesse. I appreciate that. I'm just going through to see if anything stands out here. What about Planet X? I'm not really into that. I'm not saying that God couldn't be traveling on a planet like that. Of course he could. you know, he kind of likes his home too. Earth is his, heaven is his throne, and earth is his footstool. Yeah, I mean, you can't say that. Some people say, well, God's a spirit, he's everywhere, he's nowhere. Who's to say? Maybe God wants to be in a body once in a while. Well, how can you fight that? So, and that's what they say Jesus was, right? Now, I know about the triune and the Trinity and all that, but let's just say that God himself came down and was Jesus. I'm not saying he couldn't do that. I'm not convinced that that's what happened, because if that were the case, we'd see some other evidence of it in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and from James, the brother of Jesus in particular, who didn't say that. But regardless, I would not restrict that God couldn't. So what's to say he wouldn't like to have a little planet to live on? Maybe it's his summer vacation. I don't know. God's not a prude, first of all, and he enjoys himself. He does. I have a very dear friend a lady, she's probably watching on here, and she said one day, she says, you know, if God didn't have a wife, he'd probably have made one for himself. And of course, most Christians go, no, 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 yeah, yeah, yeah. Be careful, don't restrict God. I mean, you know, I had another friend who told me, you know, don't tell God how to do his job. Yeah, I agree. You know, okay. Yeah, I like that too, Jesse. Yeah, they could, for lack of a better term, we won't see them until they uncloak in this dimension. Yeah, and block out the sun and moon. That's a very good possibility. Yeah, because the sky shall be darkened, the sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall be turned to blood. Well, the moon turning to blood is actually a sign of a lunar eclipse. Of course, that's pretty obvious. So Jesus was saying that it'll be at a time when there will be a lunar eclipse. The sun being darkened, it could be what you're talking about or something else. I really can't say one way or the other. All I know is that we're supposed to be watchmen and we're supposed to be watching the signs of the times. So that's what I try to do. But I would not dismiss what you're saying, Jesse. I certainly wouldn't. I kind of like that actually because, you know, in the past, we have all these, you know, we have War of the Worlds, we have alien invasions and all these things. We even had Ronald Reagan say, well, golly, you know, the world would be able to unite if we were being invaded by aliens. Well, what are the earthly kingdoms worried about? You see where I'm going with this? About their power. They want to stay in power. So if there were aliens coming, the chances are that they would lose their power. So what it could be is God sending his armies here to take away their power. And that's why you have all this stuff about how bad aliens are. Maybe they're not bad at all. Maybe they're God's army. Very well could be. The eighth day, yeah. Explain the eighth day when God formed Adam from the dust of the ground and breathed the spirit in his nostrils. Was Adam separate from man created on the seventh day? That gets kind of complicated. um, Again, I think the way I'd have to explain that is you'd have to go back to the idea of the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the circle. Eight, we kind of look at it, if you tilt it sideways, it's basically infinity. There is no time, right? So the eighth day is really a time. It's a. I think infinity is probably here's how I would explain it. You're in eternity right now. You're in eternity right now. And if you're going to start talking about what's eternal, meaning forever, what you're really talking about isn't that. You're talking about what God is. So eternal life, more than meaning living forever, it can mean that too, but it means living the eternal life, living the God life. So, you had Adam. He's saying here, explain the eighth day when God formed Adam from the dust of the ground and breathed the spirit in his nostrils. Was Adam separate from man created on the seventh day? No. It's a school, and I've talked about that before. It's a movement so that God's children can have an experience so that they, well, this is going to sound like New Age, but it's really not. Because there are those who have talked about this that, that I have not seen or heard, and people will say, well, no, that's misquoted. No, it's not. Even Abraham was told that his seed would be as the stars of heaven and the sand on the seashore, which is a really interesting concept. Sand on the seashore. Does that mean that all of his children are going to be just born here on the earth? Or is there something else in the future? Jesus said, I would that and I've quoted this before, I would that you would have life and that more abundantly, not less than you have here, but this and added upon more abundant. What's going on here? I'll just leave it at that. So, in other words, you had the spiritual Adam that was created. Then you had the Adam formed from the dust of the ground. What's that? And I talked about that in a video a long time ago, where my view is that he was born as anybody else was born, just like you're formed from the dust of the ground, same exact way. It wasn't like a brick, taking the mud and forming a statue and then bringing it to life. No, you are formed from the dust of the ground. So you had, in my estimation, you had a spiritual existence, which is Genesis 1, and then you have a physical experience where you're born of a woman in the physical realm. Does that mean that you weren't born before from a female? No, I'm not saying that. But in this environment here, so you are formed from the dust of the ground. Formed from the dust of the ground, not spontaneously come into existence. Okay. Yeah, they're at war with us. They're shortening our lives. The evil ones are. That's for sure. Okay, golly, guys, we've been going for an hour and a half. Again, I think the important thing to know right here, and I've said it many times, is that the real enemy of the New World Order, the real enemy of everything that you see going on is you. It's the people. It's a war against the people of the earth. Every nation is at war with their own people. So the battle assessment is that we're getting hurt pretty bad. And something's going to have to change here. But before it does, the wicked are going to be vying for this power like we see between Russia and NATO and the U.S. So that's not to say that Putin isn't taking out the New World Order. I mean, he's certainly now moved to the BRICS system, right? I mean, the petrodollar is done. We knew they were going to take that out anyway, but maybe they didn't quite figure out that Putin would move in the direction he has. Maybe the AI wasn't as smart as they thought. I don't know. All we can do is just watch and see. But my bottom line is I think Putin is now at war with the WEF and the New World Order. That's how I look at it. People could say I'm wrong. No, he's a part of the system. Well, we'll see. But as it stands right now, a lot of their nefarious, hidden agenda has been exposed at this point in time. And Russia did it. We didn't. We've been trying to cover it up. Look at the Hunter Biden laptop. I just talked about it here a little bit ago. The FBI says we don't know where it is. The world's premier law enforcement agency doesn't know where the Hunter Biden laptop is. But they'll put January 6 protesters in prison without trial, taking away their rights. It's evil. It's the most evil government on the face of the earth. And that's a close second right there. Oh, I don't have Zoom. I'm not going to either. Okay, we've been going for a long time. I just want to see if... Okay, here's on the fifth day, Adam, man was created. After the seventh day, God rested. On the eighth day, God put Adam in the Eden. Yeah, see, 1,000 years with the man, God, Earth Day. Yeah. Look on it as a spiritual creation, Jesse, and then the formation into the material, physical world. Because, as it says in Genesis, there, the spirit and the body are the soul of man. Because when God formed man in the belly and then breathed the breath of life into him, then he became a living soul. So that I view it a little. I don't view the soul as being the spirit, which is what a lot of people do. You are a soul, is the way I look at it, because the way Genesis describes the spirit and the body are the soul of man. So I look at it a little differently, but I like your explanation there. Yeah, I like that. That's good. Okay. Thank you, Felicia. You always say nice things. You and Roosevelt always say, and Jesse, you always say nice things. And again, I'm not 100% on everything. Of course not. Nobody is. You know, God hasn't revealed the secrets to me. Like I just said, I can't tell God how to do His job, and frankly, I don't really. You know, my son-in-law, one of my sons-in-law, he's like a world-class mechanic, and he has this plaque uh, at where he works and in his own private work area, and it shows this guy throwing a wrench and hitting this other guy in the head, saying, "Don't tell me how to do my job." So I don't want to tell God how to do His job and get hit in the head. You know, I want to stay out of His way. I wouldn't mind knowing a little bit about it, because you know, and I think a lot of times we're given a little discernment, a little insight into it. You know, the Spirit of Christ is the Spirit of prophecy, so we're given little bits and pieces, and that's why I don't discount others' viewpoints, especially people who may not be considered Christians, because in my estimation, what's important is if they have the law of God written in their hearts and minds, if they love God and if they love their fellow man, that to me is more important than dogma. Okay, and that's what Christ says when you take my name, when you take Christ's name upon you, that's what you're really doing. You're taking His attributes. I could tell you some things about that, but I probably shouldn't today. So yeah, Felicia and Roosevelt are saying they're evil and they lost it because they're trying to cover it up. Of course, they're trying to cover up their own crimes, which is why they're so upset about what Russia's doing in Ukraine. They don't give a crap about the Ukrainian people. People over here, they don't give a crap about the Ukrainian people. They're worried about their crimes and corruption, their murders, their thievery, their plans to kill off mankind. That's they're worried about that being discovered. That's the only thing they're worried about. Okay, I've pontificated enough here today. Thanks everybody for coming. It's been an hour and 32 minutes. Uh, I hope I hope that was okay. I just thought that I want to give you that battle damage assessment and tell you that we're the ones that are being hurt, obviously, and that's the whole design of the thing. Russia could have squashed Ukraine in just a few days, but they didn't use their big artillery and their big weapon systems, including their bombers, because they don't want to destroy Ukraine. They really are, in my estimation, trying to restore what the righteousness. I don't want to say righteous. A decent government there, and especially to stop the murder of the eastern Ukrainian people in the Donbass region and Crimea. Okay, I think that is really what's happening. All right, everybody, have a good night, and I'm not sure when I'll see you again, but we'll be keeping an eye on things. Okay, remember, prep, pray, stay out of the way. Doesn't mean you can't defend yourselves, and I don't care who comes after you or your children. You have a right to defend yourself against criminals, whether they're street criminals, gangs, or government. Okay, and keep your eyes on the horizon, your ears to the ground. Keep your situational awareness on high, and get ready, because even Biden said the shortages are real because he helped create them. He created them along with his. Remember, he's the puppet that's doing the bidding. Okay. All right, everybody, take care. Out here for now.